Welcome to First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, the birthplace of congregational humanism. We carry on that tradition of free thought today, dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. Our web address is firstunitarian.org. Thank you for joining us.
Before I begin my prepared remarks, I feel like I must further address the heartbreaking events unfolding in the Middle East in the past 48 hours. This morning's poem, her daily poem from Rosemary Watola Trommer, was simply called Illogic, and it read, "Deploying bombs to achieve lasting peace, like planting barbed wire and expecting to grow a rose bush." I don't expect any of us in this room knows the way to peace in the Middle East or has any viable solution. And I know it's been a terrible regime there. And yet perhaps we can agree on the path. I think just as we have shown here in Minnesota that violence cannot put an end to violence and that only love and kindness can do that, the same must be true in and among nations, which of course isn't possible when the key players are all willing to do violence at any cost. So I can only pray that this ends quickly, that the human cost is low, and that those in power come to see that another way is possible. May that be so. So, Kurt Vonnegut was a deeply humanist anti-war author, characterized by a blend of biting satirical humor, profound pessimism, and deep empathy. Born in Indiana, he lived in New York City for nearly the last half of his life, and during that time, he gave a commencement address to Fredonia State College in upstate New York. It was in that speech that he spoke of the unlocking season, noting that the poetry of 4 seasons is all wrong for this part of the planet. He claimed that there were 6 seasons, not 4, at least for the northern latitudes, and here's what he said. Spring is May and June. Summer is July and August. Autumn is September and October. Next comes a season called locking. November and December aren't winter, they're locking. Then comes winter, January and February. And what comes next? Not spring, unlocking comes next. What else could cruel March and only slightly less cruel April be? March and April are not spring, they are unlocking, end quote. Cruel March and only slightly less cruel April. As I said, Vonnegut was profoundly pessimistic, or as some have said, not a happy man. As for me, I quite like the notion of March and April being the unlocking season, because after a time of snow and ice, we all need some unlocking, a time of thaw. And seeing it this way offers the possibility of transition and maybe even transformation. One can only hope. Yet, this unlocking season is also a precarious time. Just on Friday morning's ride to FUS, although it was a beautiful spring-like day, I had to be pretty vigilant about the state of the bike path. Was it just water, or was it still frozen underneath? Was that frost, or just a patch of sunlight? Could I trust the melting? I proceeded with caution, more slowly than I might have liked. And so it is with our spirits, at least with my spirit. We're proceeding with caution. But can we slow down and take note, whether out of that precaution or maybe even with some delight? Is it possible to just enjoy the unlocking? It's what I loved about the reflection Shelley read. I can imagine Linda Susan, driving around a curve and slowing down for just those few seconds to see if the ice had melted. Because if the ice had melted, well, then their bird friend might reappear and they could once again feel a sense of deep connection and belonging, but it still wasn't sure that was going to happen. For what it is I hope, or I know what it is that I hope or I long to see, just for the ice to melt, for what has been locked up to actually be unlocked. Our theme for the month of March is paying attention. And isn't it rather comforting, or at least permission-giving, to let go of needing spring to be here, and rather taking the time to notice and to pay attention to the unlocking? Of course, there are, all around us, actual signs of a great unlocking. I mean, after a time of hibernating, nature is beginning to stretch and yawn. It's kind of rubbing its eyes as it wakes up from winter. The sun is rising earlier and setting later. The temperatures are beginning to moderate. It's coming on time to start seeds, or at least to plan for the garden. I feel less of an inborn urge to hunker down and find myself a little more interested in heading out to concerts, to gatherings, to walks. There is an unlocking going on, and yet it comes in fits and starts, which I guess is what unlocking is. There's some melting and then some freezing and some spring-like warmth and then some deep cold. It's not here yet, but we hope it's coming. So could we simply pay attention now to this season as it is? I am always astounded that what I experience and or read in the days leading up to each Sunday somehow provides some helpful bit of wisdom or understanding. Something floats into my awareness or tickles my creativity. You might think of this as a muse, but I tend to think about it as paying some kind of subconscious attention, because my thoughts are all kind of tuned to the Sunday topic and what I might say. That attention means that I notice things I wouldn't have otherwise made note of. Like this week, just yesterday, during my morning ritual of listening to podcasts, I tuned into Radiolab, which I love. Lo and behold, there was my aha. And it makes me wonder if, when I retire and am no longer preparing weekly reflections, if I'll able to find meaning in anything at all, if I don't have to talk about it later. Well, this particular episode was a rerun. I'd heard it before, but I heard it in a different way, simply because of today's topic, the unlocking season. The episode is called Black Boxes, and they were exploring several examples of things that happen in a locked kind of way, which, when unlocked, revealed something that we can't quite yet explain. And they were wondering what actually happens during that lockdown. One example they offered was the experience of being anesthetized. What happens during that? Another was about a magic trick that no one could seem to figure out. More importantly for today, it was about what happens inside a chrysalis from which a moth or butterfly emerge. You probably know this, but the transformation from caterpillar to butterfly remains a bit of a mystery. It doesn't happen, like some kind of high-speed evolution, or like a transformer toy in which the caterpillar just morphs into a butterfly, like all the butterfly parts are inside the caterpillar and they just kind of unfold. It's not like that at all. The caterpillar dissolves in the cocoon into this kind of cosmic goo, as if all the atoms had to deconstruct and rearrange in order to then become something new. It's a mystery that becomes even more mystifying through studies that have found that even in all that kind of deconstruction, the goo retains a kind of memory from when it was a caterpillar. You'd have to listen to understand that at all. It's a good listen. I won't go further with that. But we could apply this analogy to this season for sure, in the sense that at this time of year is messy and muddy. Things are beginning to awaken underground. We can't see them. And each day is a new and pretty unpredictable weather adventure. But I'm more interested in how we can apply this analogy of unlocking to our personal journeys of transformation and really to societal and social change in general. If we expect spring to happen in March, at least for it to match that classic picture of glorious, fresh and green budding. If we expect that at this latitude, we are going to be sorely disappointed. But if we expect March and April to be a time of unlocking, a time of transition before that truly different season of spring arrives, well, then perhaps we can relax into gleaning the lessons that come from all the messiness. The world is a messy place right now. We'd like, I'm sure, for our world to be more predictable, for our bird friend to show up in the same place in the same way every day as a harbinger of that all is well with life. We'd love to be able to trust that the wings of the world are spreading forth into freedom and justice, democracy. But it doesn't always work that way. Things change, relationships wane and wax, administrations turn over, agendas shift. Those with power act immorally, regimes topple. The earth just moves beneath our feet. I'm not suggesting that we just watch it and let it happen. I really believe that each of us has a role in exerting pressure where we can and putting our values forth into the world and making a difference through the choices we make. But what I'm suggesting is that paying attention is part of what we can do. Slowing down enough to take in the realities around us, good and bad. Using our eyes and our ears to discern what is true and what is good. Taking the time to intentionally focus on what matters. Because I think in this flurry of rising fascism, it's been especially hard to see that we matter and that what we choose to do with our lives matters. And perhaps especially in such a chaotic time as this, it's hard to allow ourselves to just turn to mush, if only for a little while. Caterpillars lock themselves into a shell-like cocoon, and what? I don't know what compels them to lock themselves up and become a chrysalis, or really what they do when they're inside of that. But I do know that they need that time to become a butterfly, if that's what they're going to become. That's their process. They lock themselves up, they turn to mush, and then they wait. And eventually they emerge, all in just like 10 to 14 days. Unlike caterpillars, our future is not so certain. Nor do I think most of us are that patient, to give ourselves the time to catch our breath, time to heal, to release anxiety, to rearrange our primary natures, and the time to pay attention to what has happened, to decide what to do or what to become next. Yet we need to take that time because we do have some control over what happens inside our own small chrysalis, which then influences what happens in the wider world. We have just witnessed a lot of locking going on in our cities. There's been the actual winter, of course, with its cold and snow, and then there's been the presence of a much more abusive kind of ice. There have been lockdowns in our schools and neighbors locked down in their houses and innocent people locked up in detention, locked away from their loved ones. It's not over yet, and it's not yet clear if or how much this human iteration of ice is going to release its grip. But I think we can hope that because of our efforts, because of our resistance, that a Minnesota spring is coming. Not of its own accord, but because we're paying attention. And more so, we can hope for a Minnesota spring because of what we learned while we were paying attention. We learned to show up for one another, We learned that singing helps our spirit and unfreezes animosities. We learned that we have to keep our eye on those who are in power and to hold them accountable. We learned that we can reorganize ourselves into pods of care and action. And we learned that our values of love and kindness are the strongest kind of resistance. March doesn't have to be seen as cruel, but rather as a messy and necessary part of change, and we are in a kind of cosmic zoo that will surely birth something new, which might not be the bird friend we expected, but a new kind of way of being together in community and in relationship. And in this time, We can pay attention and watch for what might be unlocking, to see where there might be the possibility of the transformations of which we dream. Paying attention, while not one of Vonnegut's seasons, I think is an important practice for all the seasons of our lives. As Thoreau suggested, live in each season as it passes. Breathe the air, drink the drink, taste the fruit, and resign yourself to the influences of each. We are in an unlocking season. May it be so.
Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.